Everyone is calling this the most competitive law school cycle in history, and they're only half right. Of course, there are more applicants, higher LSAT medians, and less room for error, but behind closed doors, law schools are dealing with a very different problem. It's not about rankings or prestige, it's about money. And once you understand why money is suddenly a problem for law schools, that changes your entire law school admissions strategy. Because this cycle and the next several may become more and more negotiable over time. Because for decades, law school tuition has been climbing steadily. And what made it survivable for law schools was federal loans. As long as students could borrow whatever they needed, schools could raise tuition and let the future you deal with the consequences. But that system only works when federal borrowing feels unlimited. And today in 2026, it no longer does. Because when you look at the cost of attendance, tuition plus living expenses at many top schools is now pushing right up against or even past what federal loans can comfortably cover. This is due to the elimination of the Grad Plus loans starting in July of this year, which will affect everybody starting law school this fall and beyond. And once the federal Grad Plus loans are eliminated, students will face three options. One is private loans, another is family money, and the third option is choosing a cheaper law school. And that last option, you having an alternative to paying a high sticker price tuition, that fundamentally changes the dynamics of admissions. Because for years, admissions followed a pretty simple rule. If school A was ranked higher than school B and both admitted the same student, school A usually won. In other words, your typical applicant would go to the best law school they got accepted to. But rankings are not going to pay your loan bills. Net tuition does. So at that point, sticker price becomes almost meaningless. What matters is what you actually pay after scholarships. And that number varies wildly even between similarly ranked schools. And when the debt starts to feel real, students stop choosing the better ranked school and start choosing the one with less painful debt associated. So inside admissions offices right now, officers are quietly panicking over the coming elimination of the federal Grad Plus loans. Now, if a school ranked 25 historically lost most head-to-head competition with schools ranked 15 through 20, that was normal. But what if that lower ranked school could flip just a couple of those outcomes by reallocating scholarship money? If they can win in the majority of head-to-head competitions between other schools, it stabilizes their yield, it protects their medians, and it secures that sweet, sweet tuition revenue. That's why merit aid becomes a defensive tool for lower ranked law schools. And that's why the LSAT matters most than most applicants realize, because your LSAT score is a pricing signal. Schools use LSAT scores to decide how expensive it would be for them to lose you to a competitor law school. And if your LSAT score helps them protect their medians, you carry financial weight, and they are increasingly likely to give you merit aid to incentivize you or attract you to choose their school over another one. That's why two applicants who both got accepted can receive very different financial aid offers. So imagine, for example, there's a student who gets into two relatively similarly ranked law schools. One is ranked slightly higher, and the other is ranked slightly lower, but the lower ranked school is significantly cheaper. When you could easily take out loans, the higher ranked school would win. But this cycle, schools are seeing more students choose the cheaper option. And that's happening more often than even they themselves would have expected. Now, schools care a lot about yield. Yield is the percentage of admitted students who actually enroll. When schools lose strong candidates late in the cycle, that calls their entire model into question. And schools can't just take in more students to compensate, because over enrollment or offering admission to too many students that can create real problems with student-faculty ratio, employment outcomes, or whether the school is still within ABA compliance. And so instead of radically changing class size, schools change their pricing by giving out scholarships. That's why money is the ultimate lever for the schools. And so for you as an applicant, that's where your strategy comes into play. Because if you apply broadly to a large range of schools and you can get multiple offers, especially offers with meaningful financial differences, you have the advantageous position, you have leverage because you represent a real internal debate for the school. Admissions will be asking themselves, are we about to lose this student to a competitor school because of money? When the answer might be yes, they might just give you more money. Of course, this does not mean every school is about to hand out full rides to every comer. There are real financial constraints, of course. Some schools will look to cut costs, some will increase their class sizes a bit, and some will just struggle financially if they can't get enough students paying full price. But what is changing is how aggressively schools protect their position, especially around their medians. If your LSAT and GPA are above a school's median, that makes you competitive. It makes you a strategic asset for the school. Now, if you've already applied, you might have noticed that decisions are dragging. This cycle is moving incredibly slowly, and that's not by accident. It's because early applicant numbers spiked. Applicant numbers are up significantly over the past 2 years, as much as 50%. And so schools are waiting and watching because they want to preserve flexibility. And that makes wait lists more important than usual. And that's where money conversations get really serious. That's where negotiation comes into play. Now, one of the biggest factors working behind the scenes on top of all this is the coming demographic cliff, meaning there are fewer people in the age range who are going to college, which means fewer college graduates, which means fewer law school applicants coming up in the next couple of years, which means that schools are going to need you more than you need them. They have more competition over a limited number of applicants as we approach 2030, which is when the demographic cliff really kicks into play. And so law schools are preparing early by admitting more students. They want to build up their nest egg of tuition if they are tuition reliant for their operations. And if you add into this, of course, legal hiring uncertainty, artificial intelligence, and it becomes harder for schools to sell you on taking on massive debt, which means schools are going to be more likely to give out financial aid. Now, most applicants, unfortunately, are still playing the old game where they treat the first offer as the final offer. They don't realize they can negotiate, or if they do negotiate, they do so without leverage, or they obsess over rankings without looking at debt over time. And so the real shift you've got to understand is to recognize that you are in a desirable position as an attractive law school candidate. And so it's about who's willing to pay you the most money to keep you and get you to choose their school. It's not about getting in, it's about the pricing. How much are you going to pay for your JD? And of course, the best way to maximize your position as a competitive applicant to get as much scholarship money as possible is by getting the strongest possible LSAT score. The higher your LSAT score is above the median of the school you are applying to, the more scholarship money you can get. In many cases, you can get a full ride. And if you'd like my help getting the highest possible LSAT score, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody watching this now or later. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. And of course, if you find these lives helpful, I do these every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you happen to be watching this. Really do appreciate your spreading the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. So if you could share this in your Discord, your Reddit forums, Facebook groups, wherever you're hanging out with other law school applicants, I do appreciate your sharing the information about these lives. Matt1029 is saying, I'm at UCF right now for legal studies. Should I start studying for the LSAT now in my first year? So I understand that you're a freshman in college right now, majoring in legal studies. Do you need to study for the LSAT now? No, you don't need to study for the LSAT yet. I would say, if anything, maybe you want to focus more on your undergraduate GPA for now, since you are so early in the process here. So maybe just enjoy college, get the highest possible GPA, and then maybe in a year or two, when you're ready to seriously pursue law school, if you're confident law school is what you want to do, then in that case, maybe you would want to start studying for the LSAT, but it might be premature at this point. Your LSAT score is good for 5 years, by the way. And if you're a junior or a senior in college, of course, you could still take a year or two before applying. But if you're so early that you're a freshman, you wouldn't want your LSAT score to expire before you even applied, because not everybody goes direct from undergrad to law school. So maybe you want to give it a year before you apply, before you start studying for the LSAT. But even if you started as a sophomore and you studied for a whole year, that full year could be enough for you to secure a top LSAT score. And when you take it as a junior, and then you're still in pretty good shape. Gallery of BB's asking what to major in for corporate law. So if you want to practice corporate law, you don't need any particular major in your undergrad, right? So you can major in any subject and still go to law school. You could major in humanities, you could major in STEM fields, you could major in comp sci, doesn't matter. Literally any major is totally fine for pursuing law school. And so that applies whether you want to go into corporate law or another area entirely. So major in whatever you think would be most interesting for you, whatever you would enjoy, whatever could help you get a top GPA, and then you could go to a top law school. I'd say maximize for your GPA, because that is the biggest factor in the law school admissions process. So major in whatever you'd enjoy and you think you could be good at. As simple as that. There's no particular major that you need for corporate law in particular. Scanning through here for other questions. Rahul says, I'm a 1L now. Just wanted to say your videos helped me a lot when I was applying. Thank you. Awesome, Rahul. Glad you found the videos helpful. Congrats on making it into law school. Hope that you're rocking it in 1L. I think that's great. Nini's asking, do schools have a preference for applicants with work experience? It's always nice to have. They like to see that you have real-world exposure to the practice of law, but you can also apply to law school directly from undergrad, and that's also fine. So you could be a so-called KJD, going directly from undergrad to law school. If you've got the numbers, if you have the GPA, if you have the LSAT score, you're in a pretty good position. If you have some work experience, that's also great to have, of course, especially if it's legal in nature, if you've worked as a paralegal, if you've worked in politics, if you have any real-world exposure to the practice of law, all of that can certainly help. Not necessary, though. So just go to law school whenever you feel ready. And if you do have the work experience, of course, highlight it in your letters of rec, highlight it in your application essays. And of course, it'll be on your resume. Ava's saying, my undergrad GPA is very high. However, my LSAT GPA is lower because of courses I took in high school. Yeah, that's unfortunate. A lot of folks are in that exact same position. And it is what it is. At this point, the best place for you to focus your energy, your time, your attention is on getting a higher LSAT score to compensate for a relatively lower GPA. So in other words, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but we make the best of the situation that we're in. The LSAT GPA is ultimately what counts, though, because that's what goes to the American Bar Association and in turn going to U.S. News for inclusion in the ever-important U.S. News Law School rankings. Braden's asking, with the looming demographic cliff in higher education, do you anticipate that law schools will be forced to lower medians in order to attract more students? Fantastic question, Braden. So as I was alluding to earlier, there will be a drop in the number of college graduates and the number of law school applicants in the coming years because of the declining U.S. birth rate ever since the Great Recession back in 2008. And so a lot of law schools will be forced to close, a lot of universities in general will be forced to close, and a lot of them will consolidate or merge. Law schools and undergraduate institutions aren't talking about this very much, but the data shows the trend line I actually posted a graph of this on my YouTube channel on the posts or community tab the other day. You could see that trend line dropping precipitously. It's going to hit universities first starting this fall, I think, and then it'll hit law schools around 2030 or so. So when you have a decline in demand for anything, you have a reduction in the cost. And law schools will basically be forced to compete for a smaller and smaller pool of applicants, meaning they will be forced to lower their standards or lower their class sizes or both. Now, the problem with law schools lowering their class sizes is that many of them are dependent on tuition. And so if they reduce their size of their school and they have fewer students, they're taking in less money. So it's better for them maybe to give out a little bit in scholarships to attract students rather than shrinking their size, but they will also need to lower their standards as well. So it may be easier to get in, yes, with a lower LSAT score or a lower GPA. Of course, that's not directly applicable this cycle. In fact, this cycle, applicant numbers are significantly up due to the bad economy, due to the trailing factor of the last year's presidential election cycle. And so it's more competitive this cycle maybe, but as time goes on, it's going to get easier and easier to get in as we approach 2030. Jeb is asking, will the LSAT be gone this year? So contrary to rumors and popular perception, the LSAT has not disappeared. Its death, reports of its death are premature, basically. So the LSAT is still the main game in town, the primary game in town. The American Bar Association is allowing some law schools to accept applicants without LSAT scores, perhaps with a GRE score instead or with great grades from undergrad. But the thing ultimately is that the LSAT is the single exam most strongly correlated with first-year law school grades as well as bar passage rates. And so for that reason, very, very few people are getting in without an LSAT score on their record. In fact, we saw that despite the significant increase in the number of applicants to law school overall over the past 2 years, there has been a decline in the number who got in with GRE scores. And normally you would have thought that with many more people applying in general, with the size of the pie increasing, the absolute number of GRE accepted applicants would also increase, but in fact, it actually declined despite the rise in applicants, telling us law schools are not too keen on the GRE. Very few people are getting in with the GRE or the JD Next or anything else like that. And so if you really want to show that you're serious about law school in particular and that you're not applying to law school on a whim, the best way to show that you're serious about law school and that you have what it takes to succeed in law school and to succeed on the bar exam as well is going to be to have the strongest possible LSAT score. Additionally, the LSAT score is what goes to the American Bar Association, which in turn goes to US News for inclusion in the law school rankings. And so if you want to maximize the schools you can get into and you want to maximize your merit scholarship offers, the LSAT score is going to be the way to do just that, because it helps the school in their rankings to accept an applicant with higher LSAT scores. The GRE, the JD Next aren't going to do the same for the schools, and so it's not to your advantage to neglect or avoid the LSAT. Alex is asking, should I choose Wash U and pay sticker price or Belmont full ride? And so to be frank, Alex, there are over 200 ABA approved law schools. I'm not familiar with every single one of them in detail. For any law school, when you're considering, should I go to this school or that school, I would look at bar passage rates. I would look at employment outcomes, how many of their graduates are in a job that requires a JD 9 months after graduation. And you can see all of this in any given law school's ABA 509 reports. So for any school that you're interested in, look at that data. Again, it's the American Bar Association 509 reports. You just Google a given school's name, ABA 509, and you'll be able to see that data, and you'll be able to get a good sense of the possibilities available to you upon graduating. To what extent will this school or that school set you up for success? which is asking which schools give good scholarships, and does a graduate degree help your application? So nearly every single law school will give out good scholarships, provided that you have the numbers to back up the strength of your application. So if you have a high LSAT score, if you have a high GPA, and if those numbers are high relative to a given law school's medians, then they become more and more likely to give you scholarship money the higher your numbers are above their medians. So with sufficiently high numbers, you can get a full ride to most law schools out there. Of course, it's harder to get a full ride to a T14 law school, and Harvard and Yale law schools do not give out merit aid because they don't need to. They already have the reputation to attract plenty of deserving applicants. But for other law schools, you can get merit aid significant in many cases. Now, a graduate degree, a master's, a PhD, it won't help you that much. Of course, it's nice to have, but they only evaluate your undergraduate GPA. They don't factor graduate level GPAs into their calculations because not everybody has one. And so it's the undergrad GPA that truly matters here. Scanning through here for more questions coming in. Chase Lomax is asking, do you think if my LSAT is 2 points under median, but GPA is 75th percentile, I have a decent chance? I would argue yes. So you can either be a splitter applicant with a high LSAT and a low GPA, or you could be a reverse splitter with a low LSAT and a high GPA. Either one is okay. You still can get in if you're in either one or the other position. If you're below both LSAT and GPA, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's unlikely. If you're above on both LSAT and GPA, then you are not only likely to get in, but also to potentially get scholarship money as well. Now, the thing is that when you are a reverse splitter, if your GPA is high and your LSAT's low, you can still raise your LSAT score. In other words, the game is not over. You can still retake the LSAT. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores, but rather they only take the highest score on record. And so if your LSAT's 2 points under the median, you might just want to retake the LSAT. And then you'll have both an LSAT and a GPA above median, putting you in the best possible position. In contrast, if your LSAT is high and your GPA is low, you can't necessarily or easily at least redo all of undergrad to raise your GPA, but when your LSAT's lower and your GPA is high, you can still raise your LSAT. So you might want to pursue that option. And of course, if you would like my help raising up your LSAT score, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody watching this now or later. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well and Instagram as well. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. I know a lot of you have more nuanced or unique questions that I can't get all the context for here in this conversation today. Just due to the format, I can try to answer them on a surface level that will apply to a wide variety of folks who are watching this now and later. But if you want to talk through particulars, feel free to book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. Of course, I'll be happy to help you out. Naomi Spam's asking, I want to take business in college. Will I still be able to go right into law school afterwards? Yeah, so you can go direct from undergrad to law school, no matter what you majored in. I would think about maintaining a high GPA. So make it as close to 4.0 as possible, and then try to carve out some time to study for the LSAT while you're in undergrad. So if there's, say, one particular semester where you could take a bit of a lighter course load, or you could study for the LSAT over the summer, that way you can apply with both a high LSAT score and a high GPA as well, putting you in the best possible position as a so-called KJD, meaning that you're going straight from undergrad into law school. In contrast, we've got Morset asking, I'm 27, I graduated college in 2021. Will that make it harder for me to get into law school? I would say not at all. I mean, you can go direct from undergrad to law school. You can also take a couple of years off, get some work experience ideally, and then go to law school. Totally fine. Law schools do not discriminate against older applicants. They love older applicants. And by the way, 27 does not make you an older applicant. I'm just speaking broadly here. Many non-traditional law students who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond can still go to law school, become successful attorneys. Law schools love older applicants. They love the real world experience and exposure to the practice of law, if you have it, relative to those who never had any law related position before. So totally fine. Just cover in your resume, cover in your application essays what you've done since undergrad to tell that story. Jams is asking, what law schools are good in New York City? Well, you've got a lot of law schools available to you in New York City. I'm a New Yorker myself, so I can rattle them off for you. You've got Columbia, NYU, Fordham, Brooklyn, Cardozo, St. John's. You've also got Hofstra in Long Island. You have Rutgers in New Jersey. You have Pace University as well. Plenty of options available to you. Some are high ranked, some are T6, some are T50, some are T100. Wide variety of options. And so you can cast a wide net and not have to relocate if you don't want to leave New York, assuming that you're already there. And you also, if you are in New York already, then you can, of course, tour a lot of these schools, visit the campus, talk to admissions, and they will also note that on your record that you visited. Doesn't give you a huge boost, but helps to demonstrate interest in the school, of course. If you want to go to a top law school of a T6 like Columbia or NYU or a Harvard, a Yale, a Stanford, you should know that they do have pretty high requirements in terms of LSAT and GPA. Their LSAT medians all range roughly 170 to 174. Their GPA medians all range around a 3.9 or so, and so you do want to have the numbers to support your application. If you're below on the GPA, you ideally want to be above on the LSAT. Not saying that you have to go to a T14, of course, but if you do, those are the kinds of numbers you'd want to have on your application. Apple users asking, what if my undergrad GPA was terrible and it was a 2.7, but I did do a paralegal certification with a 3.7 GPA? So only your undergraduate GPA is factored in for admissions. Anything extra, anything graduate level or certification related will not count for your LSAT calculated GPA. And so unfortunately, the 2.7 or thereabouts is going to be what matters for admissions. But of course, there's also your LSAT score. And so you're going to be a splitter applicant, lower LSAT, higher GPA. Totally fine. Just direct all that energy that you have available to you now into the LSAT in particular to compensate for a lower GPA. Mac Gray's asking, how much does resume and narrative matter relative to GPA and LSAT if I am a double high? So if your LSAT's high and your GPA is high, that's great because those are the two biggest factors in admissions. The way it goes for admissions is LSAT is the number one most important factor, GPA is the second factor, and then everything else is a distant third, meaning everything else doesn't really matter a whole lot. Of course, they will see it, they will look at it, but there is this myth of holistic admissions that law schools love to trumpet as if they are considering the whole person, which would be nice if it were true. But when you look at the data, when you look at the stats, you can see this for yourself online on places like LSD, for example, Law School Decisions, I think is the site. You can see that merit aid and admissions are directly correlated with your LSAT score and your GPA. It's almost a one-to-one relationship. So can application essays and resume and letters of rec be a tiebreaker? Couldn't they tip the needle? Can they help you to compensate for lower numbers? Sometimes, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So if people ask me, can you look at my application essays? Can you look at my personal statement? Can you help advise me? Should I get letters from professors or employers or a mix? Or I haven't talked to this professor in 10 years. What should I do? To me, those questions are all distractions from getting you the highest possible LSAT score. Unless you have achieved your goal score, unless your LSAT score is above the medians of the schools to which you're applying, then you should not be devoting any thought or attention to the soft factors. In other words, get the LSAT score first, and then we can have that conversation regarding the essays. But first, lock down on the LSAT. And DJ's asking, with a 4.0 GPA, do I have some wiggle room on my LSAT? That's a great question. So you've secured the 4.0 GPA. You're good on that number. Now you're asking, what do I need for the LSAT? So has the 4.0 GPA earned you some wiggle room? That's one way to look at it. So in other words, yes, you could say, I can afford to get a lower LSAT because my GPA is higher. But to me, that's the wrong way to look at it. I think a more useful framework would be, I've gotten a 4.0 GPA. I'm now going to match that 4.0 GPA with a killer LSAT score and be an undeniable applicant for virtually any law school I could consider applying to. So you're like, well, I've got a 4.0 GPA. Could I get away with only getting a 160 LSAT just to make something up? Maybe, but you're going to be selling yourself short, and some law schools will not take you if you had a 160 LSAT. In contrast, if you matched your 4.0 GPA with a 175 LSAT or a 180 LSAT, then you could get into virtually any law school and get significant scholarship money at many of them. So in my view, the 4.0 GPA gives you all the more motivation and fuel to get a 175 plus LSAT score, because then you can get into a lot of the T14 law schools and maybe get full rides at a lot of great law schools as well. So use the 4.0 as additional fuel to push for an even higher LSAT rather than settling for less than what you're capable of. Fair? Might not be what you're looking for as an answer. You can study for the LSAT less if you want to, but if you are motivated to go for the higher LSAT and you want my support, again, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring to everybody watching this now or later, private one-on-one video tutoring with me personally. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok, Instagram as well. Christopher's asking, do schools really look at GPA addendums? Yeah, they do. They do look at them. I mean, they'll look at whatever you give them. Will it be impactful? Will it matter? It could provide some useful context. Let's say that your GPA in undergrad was lower than it might have been because you had a family issue, a personal crisis, a health emergency of some sort, and you had a lower GPA than you otherwise would have for maybe a semester or two. That is worth explaining in a short, matter-of-fact addendum where you don't make excuses, you don't throw a pity party, but you explain matter-of-fact what happened and why, and you give the law school reason to think that this sort of thing won't happen again. It could help. At the same time, the numbers are the numbers. And so you're still going to want to compensate for the lower GPA with a higher LSAT score. Now, the next question is, well, will law schools look at a low LSAT addendum? And yes, they will technically look at it. Their eyes will read the words that you write to them. Will it matter, though? Probably not very much, because the question is, well, if you had a low LSAT on a particular day because you had a bad proctor or a tech issue, that's unfortunate, but the next question is, why didn't you just retake the LSAT to show law schools what you are truly capable of? And if the answer is because I don't think I can do better on the LSAT, then it's like, well, the numbers are the numbers. You didn't get a higher LSAT score because you didn't put in the work that was necessary to achieve a higher LSAT score. And in some cases, maybe retaking doesn't make sense for you. Maybe you're not able or willing to put in the time. But if you were able to put in the time, and there are people, your competitors, fighting for the same seats as you who are going to be able and willing to put in that time, and they're going to take your spot in law school because it's a numbers game. And so my advice to you is, if you have a low LSAT score and you're thinking of writing an addendum, my advice instead would be to just retake the LSAT, push for that higher score, and apply with stronger numbers to put yourself in the best possible position to get into the best law schools possible with as much money as possible in scholarships. Now, Maheen is asking, does taking the LSAT multiple times raise red flags? Does having cancellations raise red flags? What is the maximum number of times that you could take the LSAT? Well, the retake limits are that you cannot take the LSAT more than 5 times in 5 years. You can only take it 7 times in your life, And if you get a 180, you can't take it again. So my first thought is, have you taken it 7 times and you're looking to take it an 8th time? And you're like, well, those retake limits are really getting me. Or you're like, well, I am concerned that taking it multiple times would look kind of fishy. I'll tell you this. If you took it 2 times, first time you got a 160, second time you got a 165, you could take it a 3rd time. And if you got a 170 or a 175, that would certainly help your chances. And if you had a 160 and a 165 and you retook it and you got a 163, meaning your score went down 2 points from your high, what would that do? Well, it wouldn't do anything because the 165 is still what counts. In other words, law schools consider only the highest score on your record. And there is no penalty for taking it multiple times. Now, if you took it 5 consecutive times on 5 consecutive LSAT administrations, and your score remained roughly the same every single time, that would lead law schools to think, is this person properly studying for each one of their takes, or are they just throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks? So my advice is take it multiple times, but actually study for each one of your takes. And look at what you did on your previous takes. Look at your weak areas, look at what might have caused you to underperform relative to your full potential, and then think about what could you do differently next time around to improve your odds of success. So if you had a bad proctor, if you had nerves and anxiety, what can you do to reduce your anxiety? What can you do to prevent the proctor from screwing you up? Have you properly simulated test day conditions? Have you tried mindfulness meditation? Have you taken several full practice tests? And by several, I mean more than 10, so that test day itself feels like just another run through and you've done it all before. Have you only self-studied? Have you only used old hand-me-down textbooks from your college roommate or your older sibling who took the LSAT when it still had logic games on it or when it was offered on paper? It's a radically different exam now. So are you using up-to-date materials with the latest LSAT updates where you have no more logic games, a second score logical reasoning section, and then the LSAT's online, of course, on the computer? Have you pursued all the support available to you, like coaching, courses, classes, videos? Of course, I've got a lot available to you for free on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. And if you're looking for more support, of course, I have the private, free, one-on-one coaching I'm offering to everybody watching this now or later. If you haven't already booked your call yet, the link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video. Happy to help you all out, help you craft your personal plan of attack. What we do during these calls is we look at your current score if you've taken a diagnostic, we look at your goal score, we look at your time frame, and we help you craft the best possible plan of attack to get you from your current score to your goal score over that time frame. For those of you taking the LSAT in just a couple of weeks, in about 1 month or so, we offer a more intensive bootcamp style approach with live coaching 7 days a week. If you have a longer time frame where you're taking the LSAT in, say, 3 to 6 months, we take a more slow and steady approach by giving you coaching maybe once a week or so, augmented by small group sessions in the evenings for more of a community approach as well, for some additional support there. So feel free to book that call. If you're looking for more help, I'm happy to help you craft a plan of attack to help you reach your goals on your time frame. Scanning through for more questions here. Adrian asks, I'm going to study for the LSAT starting now. Where do I start so I can be ready to apply in fall for 2027? So my understanding is that you're going to start now. You want to apply to law school this fall to start law school 1 year later. Awesome. I wish that more folks planned ahead like you are. I think that's great. And so on that time frame, you could either aim to take the LSAT in April or June for your first take, aim to take it in June or August for your second take, and that way you can apply as soon as applications open in the fall. Now, when crafting an LSAT study plan over the course of 3 to 5 months or so, at LSAT Unplugged, we use a LASER approach. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, sections, exams, and review. We use that for all of our student study plans. The way it works is we build a strong foundation in the learning phase, L for learning. That's working on the different sections, the different question types, getting a proper understanding of how each part of the exam works. Then A is for accuracy, drilling questions by type to better understand a strengthened question versus weakened or necessary assumption or flaw, and so on. Then we have S for individual sections, working on pacing and time management, how you allocate your time over the course of the section. E for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests, getting more of those under your belt so that test day itself feels like just another run-through. And finally, we have R for review, using the Socratic review method. The Socratic review method is an approach to help you dig deep into exactly what you're getting wrong and why, so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again. So in logical reasoning, for example, we want to see, did your mistake come from the argument, the question stem, or the choices? If it was in the argument, was there a confusing structure of the argument? Did they bury the conclusion in the middle of the argument? Did they fail to include key indicator words for evidence and conclusion, or sufficient and necessary conditions? If it was in the question, were they referring to a common question type in an unfamiliar way? If your mistake was in the answer choices, was it a tempting wrong answer? Was it an unappealing right answer? If it was a tempting wrong answer that attracted you, what made it tempting, and what ultimately made it wrong? If it was an unappealing right answer, what made the right answer unappealing, and what ultimately makes it correct? In other words, you have traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you can get down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, you may end up just making the same mistake again. And that's what we want to help you avoid. And so in the coaching, we walk you through that process live to make sure that you are fully engaging in that review process so that you're not leaving any understanding untapped. We don't want you leaving any points on the table. That's what we do in the coaching. A lot of it's giving you the accountability to make sure that you are studying with the right support structure in place. And so the question of how do we do that, Mason's asking what programs we use, what kind of programs or support could we offer. So at LSAT Unplugged, we offer a couple of different types of support. We offer private one-on-one coaching. We offer small group classes. We offer on-demand video courses. We offer custom study plans. And ideally, the best possible program will provide a killer combination of all of those different types of support. And so the private one-on-one coaching, of course, is the best kind of support because it gives you fully personalized feedback on what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong to help you avoid making the same mistake again. Then the custom study plan gives you guidance on what to work on outside of the private coaching sessions. The semi-private or small group sessions give you more frequent support in a community environment so that you can get positive feedback and encouragement and morale boosting from others who are on the same journey as you. You can get multiple perspectives from the different coaches and the other students in the program. And then the on-demand video course gives you supplemental lesson material for working on a particular method of reasoning or type of argument or type of question to give you a strong foundation in whatever weak areas you might be working on at any given point in time. And so if you want to talk through what your personal program can look like, of course, feel free to book that free LSAT tutoring with me. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Happy to help you craft your personal plan of attack. And by the way, folks, if you find these lives helpful, I do this every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you happen to be watching this. And of course, the only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. And so it really would mean the world to me if you would spread the word about these, share this to your social, share this in any Discords or subreddits or Facebook groups or group chats where you're with others studying for the LSAT. Really do appreciate your spreading the word about the lives. It really does mean a lot to me. Scanning through for other questions here. Megan's asking, Does law school admissions look down on or go tougher on those reapplying? And so if you have been rejected and you're reapplying a later year, will they discriminate against you based on what you've done, based on that the fact that you were applying in the past? I mean, not necessarily, right? I mean, the way that the admissions works is it's really a numbers game. And so if you can show them that you have higher numbers this time over last time, if you can give them updates on what you've done since you last applied, that will do a lot to show them that now you do have what it takes. And so basically the key is coming up with a very different applicant profile, a different application when you reapply to that very same law school. If you can come back and say, my LSAT is higher now, I've gotten these awards, these credentials, this work experience, updated letters of rec, all of that can make a difference. But if you apply with the same exact numbers all over again, it's not going to do a whole lot. So make sure that you can do different next time, and that can boost your odds. Marissa's asking, my GPA is a 3.1. Do I have a chance with a high LSAT score? I'm starting off with a 152 on my practice tests, but I just started. Yeah, so definitely. I mean, if you have a high LSAT score, then you always have a chance. A 3.1 GPA is not high, but of course it could be worse. I'd look at that 152 and say, okay, well, I'm at a 152 now. What work would be necessary to get me to a 162 or a 172? And then how much better could your outcomes be with another 10, 20 points on your LSAT? I actually started off with a 152 on my LSAT, and it took me an entire year, but I ended up with a 175. If I'd done it properly, I could have gotten there in less than half the time, though, because the LSAT is ultimately a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps on the LSAT, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And once you do that, everything changes. So think about what can you do differently to get your score up, to compensate for a relatively lower GPA. The higher LSAT score can do a lot for you to boost your odds. And West is saying that he or she had a 3.2 GPA, 165 LSAT, got into top 50 schools. So that right there just shows you similar GPA, but 13 points higher on the LSAT, a 165 rather than a 152, got into a lot of law schools in the top 50, no less. And so it's possible, just get your LSAT score up. And Sheboygan's asking, any recommendations for LSAT prep for tutoring classes? And so we do actually offer all of the above at LSAT Unplugged. And if you want to talk through the options, click the link in my bio, book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me, and we could talk through some options to get you some support. We, of course, can work with anyone just starting their LSAT journey like you are. So we're beginner friendly. We also, of course, can help those retaking as well who are looking for a more personalized approach. So feel free to reach out. Daryl's asking, what about the other way around, having a high GPA and a lower LSAT score? So having a high GPA is great, but my question is, why not just get a higher LSAT score also for the best possible admissions outcomes? Law schools actually weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. And so the best way that you could boost your odds right now for getting to the best law schools with as much scholarship money as possible is by getting the highest LSAT score you possibly can. And for someone like Angie, who's got a GPA below a 3.3, having a super high LSAT above 170 is going to make a massive difference. So think about what could you do to get that 170 plus LSAT for any law school that you're looking at, whether it's a school like BYU Law or a school in the top 14. The path forward always remains the same. And graduating from law school, graduating from undergrad early and going to law school is not a bad move either. You save some money on undergraduate tuition, which is always nice, but you also want to make sure that you're maintaining a high GPA. So don't graduate early at the expense of your GPA, but if you can maintain a high GPA and graduate undergrad early, then that's going to do a lot to help you out, worth considering. Scanning through here for other questions coming in. I am Fiona's asking, what can I do if I have a very competitive LSAT score, but a bad GPA from a top 5 liberal arts school? Well, you can work on your application essays. You can work on your letters of recommendation. You can work on your resume. You could also consider retaking the LSAT. You could also write a GPA write an addendum for that low GPA explaining what happened. So you have some things that you can do. When we say very competitive LSAT score, what does that mean? Like, does it mean a 160? Does it mean a 170? Very competitive is relative to the school that you're applying to. Ideally, it would be above the 75th percentile of that given school. And certainly it'd be above the median of that school. But it's all relative, and different people have different definitions of what it means to be competitive. LawSub's asking, do I suggest waiting to apply to law school until it gets less competitive? Will it be less competitive? Well, first off, I don't suggest waiting to apply a couple of years from now, hoping that things get better, because things can always change. No one can truly predict the future, of course, and there is also an opportunity cost to waiting to apply, because every year you wait is another year that you're in your current situation, rather than another year on the opposite end of your degree, having that JD, having the law degree, being a practicing attorney, presumably earning more as an attorney than you will as whatever position you're currently in right now. Presumably, a lot of you are looking to go to law school to increase your earning potential, get higher salaries, right? And so the difference between what you're currently earning and what you will earn as an attorney is the opportunity cost of not being an attorney right now. In short, don't wait. I do predict law school will get easier to get into in about 4 years due to the demographic cliff, which I spoke about earlier. Basically, the decline in the number of college students, the decline in the number of college graduates, decline in the number of law school applicants will mean that law schools are fighting harder for every applicant to maintain their class sizes, to maintain their tuition revenue. And so I do think it will get easier, but there is, of course, a cost to waiting. And so I would not wait given that. I would say apply whenever you're ready, and you can earn your own discount on tuition and make it easier for yourself to get into law school by getting the highest possible LSAT score. If you can apply with an LSAT above the median, ideally plus a GPA above the median, then you'll be putting yourself in the best possible position to get in and get scholarship money. Colt's asking, do honor council violations matter to law schools? Yeah, they probably do. I mean, when we talk about honor council violations, are we talking about something like plagiarism or cheating, something of that nature? If so, that definitely matters. It's considered a matter of ethics, a matter of integrity, and law schools take that very seriously, because as an officer of the court, as someone admitted to the Bar Association, they want to be able to rely on your honesty. And so if you have demonstrated that you are not a person of integrity and that you are dishonest when it matters, they're going to wonder, if you've been dishonest in the past, will you be dishonest in the future? And you are entrusted by your clients to maintain confidentiality, to have their best interests in mind. And so that sort of thing does matter. Law schools actually look at plagiarism and cheating very seriously. So if you have that sort of thing on your record, you definitely want to demonstrate that you have learned from the experience, that you will not do anything of that sort again. Don't make excuses for it. Explain matter of fact what happened and why, and what you learned from the experience. But do take it seriously. That sort of thing does matter. And if you want to talk about it, of course, you can definitely book a free tutoring lesson with me. We could talk through the particulars if you'd like. Arya is asking, is 3 months enough studying to get a 170 plus if my diagnostic is a 152? It could be. I mean, the improvement that you experience on the LSAT is going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. And so 3 months could be enough time if you're putting in ideally at least 10 to 15 hours per week. If you can do more, of course, that's better. Also, the way in which you study matters a great deal as well. And so if you're studying using some outdated textbook like LSAT for Dummies or Barron's or one of those terrible ChatGPT written LSAT books on Amazon with tons of fake reviews, avoid those like the plague. They're a huge waste of your time. You may not improve that much. In contrast, if you're using a real official LSAT practice questions from Law Hub, previously administered legit exam questions, if you're getting proper support in the form of private one-on-one coaching or small group classes or on-demand courses up to date with the modern LSAT format, all based on real LSAT questions, then of course you might be able to improve significantly. And of course, if you'd like my support getting the highest possible LSAT score, if you're looking for help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody watching this now or later. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. I'm happy to meet with you personally and talk you through your situation. Now, user 2837 is asking, what should I do in my gap year? Help. Okay, so you got a gap year. Maybe you have some time where you're not sure what to do with it. One idea is study for the LSAT. If you're confident law school is what you want to do, then you could put yourself in a stronger position to apply by having stronger numbers. You could also get work experience as a paralegal, get some real-world exposure to the practice of law, and then you can write about it in your applications and also feel out whether law school is actually what you want to do. Do you actually want to become an attorney? Can you get more concrete real-world data supporting your idea that law school is in fact what you want to pursue? Because it is a significant use of your time. It's a significant investment. You don't want to do it without a real sense of what law school and what being an attorney will actually be like. And so getting that work experience might not be a bad idea. Follow up on that one saying, I want to be a project assistant of some type, but it's hard to find firms that hire non-law students. Well, firms are typically hiring law students as for internships or fellowships or first-year associateships, right? So they're hiring them for some sort of summer position where they do the work similar to that an attorney will do. In contrast, to get hired as a paralegal is not quite as difficult, and you can get hired as a paralegal without a JD and just with a bachelor's. You can even get hired as a paralegal intern while you're in college. I actually worked as a paralegal intern while I was in college, and it might require just applying to a lot of firms. I'm talking about applying to dozens and dozens of firms. You only need one to say yes, but it's competitive, so you've got to cast a wide net. Apply to as many as possible, see what comes back. And in the meantime, to balance out your time with job hunting, you study for the LSAT simultaneously. Kate is asking, is it possible to increase 30 points on the LSAT in 3 months? Is it possible? Yes. Is it easy? No. What would it take? That's the question, right? So what would it take for you to improve 30 points in 3 months? It would require a radically different approach than what you've been doing up to this point. Normally, we run boot camps over a 1-month time frame, but given the increase you're looking for, I might recommend more of a 3-month boot camp style approach where you're getting consistent support multiple times a week over the course of those 3 months to make sure that you're studying the right way, studying efficiently, using real official LSAT questions with the proper structure and the proper support, reviewing your mistakes in depth. If you want to talk through what that plan could look like, Kate, and also for anyone else watching this, feel free to book the free LSAT tutoring with me. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok as well. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. And by the way, folks, I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Take care. See you tomorrow.